There was a moment somewhere around 2010 when Skype was the internet. Not just a part of it. The internet. If you wanted to see your family across the world, you used Skype. If you were running a business meeting across time zones, you used Skype. If you were a soldier deployed overseas trying to watch your kid take their first steps, you used Skype. There was no alternative. There was no competition. There was just Skype and the rest of the world catching up. At its peak, Skype had over 300 million active users. It was handling more international voice call minutes than every traditional telephone carrier on the planet combined. Not just more than one carrier, more than all of them. Together. It had become so embedded in everyday language that "Let's Skype" had entered the dictionary the same way Google it had, as a verb, which is the highest form of brand achievement a company can reach. And then Microsoft paid $8.5 billion for it, the largest acquisition in Microsoft's history at the time. And then they destroyed it. Not quickly, not dramatically. Slowly, methodically, and in ways so specifically infuriating that by 2020, Skype had gone from the app people couldn't live without to the app people couldn't delete fast enough. By the time COVID hit and the world needed video calling more than it had ever needed anything, Skype, the company that invented mainstream video calling, was an afterthought. Zoom, a 5-year-old startup almost nobody had heard of, added 200 million daily users in a single month. Skype's downloads actually declined. Think about that. The biggest video calling moment in human history happened, and the company that created the category missed it entirely. Buried inside the decisions Microsoft made between 2011 and 2020 is a pattern of corporate mismanagement so complete, so consistent, and so avoidable that it's almost impossible to study without feeling genuinely frustrated. Not one catastrophic mistake. Not a single bad hire or unlucky product launch. A series of decisions made by some of the most well-resourced executives in the technology industry that collectively transformed the world's most beloved communication app into the world's most hated one. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how they did it. And once you do, you'll recognize the same pattern in products you're using right now. Products that are probably already on their way to becoming the next Skype. But first, you need to understand what Skype actually was before Microsoft got their hands on it. Because the gap between what Skype was and what it became is the whole story. Skype was founded in 2003 by Niklas Zennström and Jonas Friis, the same two people who had previously built Kazaa, the peer-to-peer file-sharing network that had briefly terrified the entire music industry. When they built Skype, they used the same underlying peer-to-peer architecture. Instead of sharing music files between computers, Skype routed voice and video calls through a distributed network of its own users' computers. No central servers, no massive infrastructure costs. Just a clever piece of software that borrowed processing power from its own user base to run itself. This was genuinely brilliant for 2003. It meant Skype could offer free voice calls globally at a time when international phone calls cost dollars per minute. It could offer video calling years before anyone else had figured out how to make it work reliably on consumer internet connections. And it could scale rapidly because the more users it added, the more processing capacity the network gained. By 2005, eBay bought Skype for $2.6 billion, convinced it could integrate peer-to-peer calling into online auctions in ways that would transform e-commerce. That vision never materialized. eBay sold Skype in 2009 to a private equity group for $1.9 billion. A loss by any measure, but a relatively clean exit. Then Microsoft arrived. In May 2011, Microsoft announced it was acquiring Skype for $8.5 billion. The tech press was stunned by the price. Skype had revenue of around $860 million, meaning Microsoft paid roughly 10 times annual revenue for it. Even by Silicon Valley standards, that's a lot of conviction. But Microsoft's logic wasn't crazy on its face. Skype had 170 million registered users. It had brand recognition that Microsoft's own communication tools, Live Messenger, Office Communicator, had never achieved with consumers. And Microsoft was in the middle of a consumer pivot, trying to compete with Apple and Google for relevance in a world that was rapidly moving to mobile and cloud. Skype gave them a foothold in consumer communication that they couldn't have built from scratch. Or so the thinking went. Here's where the first thing went wrong, and it happened almost immediately. Microsoft didn't know what Skype was for. Was it a consumer product for families and friends? Was it a business tool for enterprise communication? Was it a mobile app? A desktop application? A feature to be bundled into Windows? An independent brand to be grown separately? The answer kept changing. And every time the answer changed, Skype's product direction changed with it. Resources got pulled toward enterprise, then back toward consumer, then toward mobile, then toward integration with Office. Engineers who had been working on improving call quality for consumer users got redirected toward building features that enterprise customers had requested. Consumer-facing improvements slowed. Enterprise features that most Skype users didn't need or want started appearing in the interface. Before I continue, subscribe to Behind the Tech right now. Every single week, we break down the hidden decisions behind the world's most spectacular tech collapses. Without further delay, let's get back to the video. Through 2012, 2013, and 2014, Skype continued to function well enough that most users didn't notice the drift. The core product, make a call, see someone's face, talk, still worked. But underneath the surface, the technical debt was accumulating. The peer-to-peer architecture that had made Skype brilliant in 2003 was becoming a liability a decade later. As Microsoft migrated more of the infrastructure to centralized cloud servers, which was the right call technically, the transition introduced instability. Calls that had been reliable became unpredictable. Connection quality that users had taken for granted started varying wildly depending on which version of the server infrastructure they happened to hit. And Microsoft kept releasing updates. Constantly. Relentlessly. Sometimes multiple times a month. Each update promised improvements. Each update seemed to introduce new problems. The app got heavier. It took longer to start. It used more memory. It drained laptop batteries noticeably faster. A piece of software that had once felt light and fast was starting to feel like a piece of enterprise bloatware that had accidentally wandered into your personal computer. Users started noticing. Then users started complaining. Then users started leaving. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, in the way that people stop going to a restaurant that used to be great, but has been getting slightly worse every visit for 2 years. And then came 2017. And everything got so much worse. In 2017, Microsoft decided Skype needed a complete redesign. The logic was defensible. Skype's interface looked dated, Snapchat and Instagram stories were dominating the attention of younger users, and Microsoft wanted Skype to feel modern and social rather than functional and utilitarian. So they rebuilt the app from scratch with a new design language, new features, new navigation, and a new visual aesthetic heavily inspired by Snapchat. The result was one of the most catastrophically received product redesigns in the history of consumer software. The new Skype buried the core functionality, making calls, under layers of new social features that nobody had asked for. Finding your contacts required navigating through menus that hadn't existed before. The interface introduced highlights, a stories-like feature that let you post photos and videos visible to your contacts for 24 hours. It added reactions to messages. It introduced a new Find tab for discovering content. It changed color schemes, font sizes, and layout in ways that made the familiar feel completely foreign. Users opened the updated app and couldn't find the call button. This is not a metaphor. Skype's own users, people who had used the app for years, were genuinely confused about how to make a phone call in a phone call app. The reviews that flooded the App Store and Google Play were not mixed. They were a wall of fury. One-star reviews in the tens of thousands. Comment sections across tech publications filled with users describing the update in language that would not be appropriate to repeat here. The thing that made it worse, and this is the part that reveals exactly what kind of company Microsoft had allowed Skype to become, is that the design team knew. Internal user testing had flagged significant usability concerns before the update shipped. The feedback was that users found the new interface confusing and that core features were harder to access. That feedback did not stop the launch. The update shipped anyway, on schedule, as planned. And then Microsoft did something that turned user frustration into genuine, lasting hatred. They made it very hard to go back. Previous versions of the app were no longer officially supported. Older interfaces were being deprecated. If you wanted to use Skype, you used the new Skype. And the new Skype, for millions of users, was an app that had taken something that worked and broken it in ways that felt deliberate. By 2018, Microsoft quietly began rolling back some of the most hated changes. The Highlights feature was removed. The navigation was simplified. Some of the Snapchat-inspired elements were quietly retired without announcement. But the damage was done in a way that a quiet rollback couldn't fix. The trust was gone. Users who had been quietly tolerating Skype's decline since 2012 had now been pushed past their limit. They weren't just leaving. They were actively recommending that everyone they knew leave with them, and they had somewhere to go. By 2018, WhatsApp had video calling. FaceTime worked across Apple devices. Google Duo had launched. Discord was growing rapidly among younger users. Zoom was steadily building its enterprise base. The moat that Skype had once held, be the only reliable option for video calling, no longer existed. There were now better alternatives in every direction. The app itself, meanwhile, had become a technical embarrassment. On Windows, it consumed memory at a rate that made even powerful laptops feel sluggish. On mobile, it drained batteries so aggressively that tech publications started including Skype in lists of apps to delete if you wanted your phone to last through the day. Update after update arrived, each one requiring a restart, each one changing something that users had finally learned to navigate, each one generating a fresh wave of one-star reviews from people who had somehow remained hopeful enough to try again. The calls themselves, the entire reason the app existed, had become unreliable in ways that felt almost personal. Calls that connected but carried no audio. Video feeds that froze mid-conversation. Dropped calls at the exact moment the conversation reached something important. Error messages with codes that linked to help pages that didn't help. A friend would try to call you through Skype, and you'd see the notification 15 minutes after they'd given up. You'd try to call someone and the app would think about it for 30 seconds before reporting that the call had failed without explanation. These weren't occasional glitches. They were the experience. They were what Skype was. And then COVID-19 arrived. March 2020. The entire world needed to work from home, learn from home, see their families from home, overnight. It was the moment Skype had been invented for. The moment that should have been Skype's absolute vindication. Zoom added 200 million daily users in a single month. Microsoft Teams, which Microsoft had been developing separately as a Skype for Business replacement, saw massive growth. Skype's own downloads went up modestly for about 2 weeks, and then declined as people who downloaded it out of habit immediately switched to Zoom after one session. The reviews during that period are genuinely painful to read if you have any emotional attachment to what Skype used to represent. People who hadn't used Skype in years downloaded it because the name was familiar, found an app that felt broken and confusing, and left reviews that were less about the software and more about a kind of personal betrayal. This used to be amazing. What happened to you? I remember when this was the best app on my computer. The anger wasn't just about bad software. It was about a thing that had mattered being ruined by people who didn't seem to care that it mattered. In July 2021, Microsoft announced it was discontinuing Skype for Business and migrating all users to Microsoft Teams. In 2023, Skype for Business Online was shut down completely. The consumer version of Skype limped on, but without any meaningful investment or development momentum. In May 2025, Microsoft announced it was shutting down Skype entirely, ending the consumer product that had once been the most recognizable communication brand on the internet. 300 million users, $8.5 billion, 22 years. Gone. Here's the lesson that Skype's collapse actually teaches you, and it's the one that gets missed in almost every post-mortem written about it. Skype wasn't killed by competition. Zoom didn't beat Skype. WhatsApp didn't beat Skype. FaceTime didn't beat Skype. Skype beat itself. Every competitor that replaced it did so, not because they were dramatically superior in technology or features. In 2015, Skype was still the most feature-rich video calling platform available. They replaced it because Skype had spent years making itself worse, slower, heavier, more confusing, less reliable, more infuriating. Each competitor that rose to replace it was essentially offering the same thing Skype had offered in 2010, a reliable video call, while Skype had drifted so far from that simple promise that it no longer reliably delivered it. The 2017 redesign didn't kill Skype. It was just the moment the killing became undeniable. The actual death had been accumulating in update logs and product strategy documents and enterprise roadmaps since 2011, invisible to users until it was too late to care. Microsoft had paid $8.5 billion for the world's most trusted communication brand. They had 300 million people who had built the habit of reaching for Skype every time they needed to connect with someone across the world. That is an asset of almost incalculable value. And they spent 9 years making decisions that systematically converted that asset into a liability. Users who felt betrayed, engineers who felt directionless, and a brand that had gone from meaning connection to meaning frustration. Right now, there is an app on your phone that you used to love. Maybe you still use it out of habit. Maybe you've noticed it's gotten slower. Maybe the last update changed something you liked. Maybe it started doing things you didn't ask it to do. Maybe the calls drop a little more than they used to. Pay attention to that feeling, because that's exactly how 300 million Skype users felt in 2013. And they didn't realize what it meant until Zoom made it obvious. Like if this made you angry on Skype's behalf. Comment the app you think is making the same mistakes right now. Subscribe to Behind the Tech, the real stories behind the tech shaping your world, every single week. And if you want to see this same pattern play out in a hardware company instead of a software one, click on this video right here. Why HTC disappeared after beating Apple. Because what Microsoft did to Skype and what HTC did to itself follow the same blueprint almost step for step. I'll see you there.